And we're live. Welcome back to the Nullified take on The Amazing Race, episode 2, leg 3. And I've got a great co host here today. No stranger to some of those who have followed some of our coverage on Australian Survivor and Survivor South Africa over the last year. But he's a man who's also got his own channel here on YouTube, Snuffed. Snuffed, welcome to the Nullified take for the very first time. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. I can't seem to find my trousers at the moment, but other than that, I'm doing very well. A great episode of The Amazing Race. And yeah, lots to discuss today because as we know, the COVID crisis has hit The Amazing Race, which has really shaken up a lot of things. And certainly with the restart coming as well, it's going to be really interesting to see how all that shakes out. First, of course, we got a massive episode to get into, which I'm really keen to discuss.
Yeah, very excited to talk to you about this episode. It's interesting because I was thinking as I was preparing the notes for this episode, what was the most difficult challenge that they had to do in this episode? But clearly, the most difficult challenge was to drive stick, right?
Of course, and Akbar and Cherie, I think they really struggled on it. A lot of them said, "Well, I learnt stick shift before. I didn't realize it'd be this hard." And of course, it's Phil's number one lesson. When you're going on the Amazing Race, you have to learn stick shift. Just like going on Survivor, you have to make fire. The Amazing Race, stick shift, it's key. And anyone that's coming on the show and not knowing how to drive stick shift is going to be left in last place. And while it didn't really impact Akbar and Cherie in the end because some other mistakes were made in the race, it did really set them behind and, obviously led to a lot of frustrations we saw with Caro and Ray and all sorts, really creating pandemonium in the race. But learn stick shift when you go on the race, Chris.
Yeah, 100%. Are you familiar with stick shift or have you always been an automatic guy yourself? Because in South Africa, where I grew up on, to get an automatic is like a luxury. And then I moved to New Zealand about 10 years ago, and it's very difficult to get a stick shift car over here.
Yeah, I do lean more towards the automatic side of things. I can, but I'm not the best, so I'm not sure how I'd fare in the race. But look, if any hope for me of getting on a show to be Survivor, Big Brother, or the Circle, not the Amazing Race, at least. At least till I've learned a little bit more of the stick shift.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I don't know, like we've never really spoken about The Amazing Race as a duo on any of our podcasts. It's always been predominantly Survivor. How big of a fan are you of The Amazing Race? And, have you done much traveling yourself? Like, can you relate to these contestants being over there in England, trying to get to Scotland and doing this? Or, I think we spoke offline about your plans to potentially go and visit the US next year. How much traveling have you done?
Yeah, I've done a fair bit, mainly through Europe. I was meant to go to Africa in 2020, but obviously something happened there. Someone got the flu, and then that ended all my travel plans. But yeah, no, had planned to head to the US in a couple months. I'll be traveling all through Central America as well. But yeah, somewhat familiar with it all. As far as the Amazing Race, I'm a pretty new fan. I watched the reality season with the Survivor, Big Brother, and the Amazing Race contestants that Colin and Christy won. I've watched a couple more here and there, but for the most part, I'm relatively almost the Amazing Race virgin at this point. I'm only beginning the ropes, and like Akbar and Cherie, learning stick shift on the go. I'm really watching it all play out right now, and taking it all under my wing and getting a handle of how the Amazing Race works. But no, it's been great so far this season. Lots of hard hitting members on the cast, and I'm really loving.
Yeah, it's a great cast. Just want to welcome here in the live stream, Kelly. Kelly, welcome to the live stream. She says, plus they're driving on the other side of the roadside and the other side of the car, which is something that I had to experience, Riley, when I went over to the US about 10 years or so. 10 years ago, I lived there for about a year before I moved to New Zealand, and I had to learn to drive on the other side of the road, sit on the other side of the car, and it can be confusing, especially when you're in big cities like they were in this specific episode. And there were quite a few people not only struggling with the stick shift, but they were also struggling to navigate through these different big cities out there. You bring up Akbar as one of those teams. We had Ray and Caro definitely struggling. I mean, he was struggling just to drive and she wasn't like, she was trying to be supportive, but I think they're like oil and water. They really don't go together. And I don't know why dating show people come onto the show thinking that they're going to find each other and create this great bond between themselves when they do in a race such as this. It's like the worst thing you could possibly do is get a new relationship on this show, and try and work things out on the show. But a lot of them were struggling to navigate definitely this episode as well. You mentioned that the show kind of ended here. Is there anything that, and that obviously it's 19 months later when they're going to come back. Is there anything that stood out in regards to some of the teams playing the game this season that could work on certain aspects, weaknesses that they have right now, that you think if they maybe modify one or two things, if they come back, they'll be a contender for the rest of the season?
Yeah, well, I think early on at this stage, it's been probably three teams that have really been dominating so far. Of course, the Holdenesses have been dominating. They won this leg of the race. Ryan and Dusty and Anthony and Spencer, again, are two teams as well who have done really well. And we'll obviously discuss Anthony and Spencer later in the podcast, I'm sure. In terms of looking at how people can improve, I think, Akbar and Cherie will definitely take a lesson from this last episode, really try and sort out those kinks in terms of, I mean, we saw Cherie in the first leg. She was really struggling with cardio, struggling to keep up. There are a lot of conflicts there between Akbar and Cherie. So I think a lot of that will be, improving those communication skills, also getting up that cardio as well so you can run around. And as well, trying to drive with stick shift a lot more as well, to really get a handle of things. So I think certainly benefiting from this 19-month isolation period, and the Amazing Race being put in an embargo, I'm sure it'll benefit plenty of teams because they'll get the opportunity to, air out their grievances, I suppose, in the race. Try and improve on those little things. But for other teams like Ryan and Dusty and Kim and Penn, I think it could actually disadvantage them because people have already seen how strong they are, and we could see people coming back to target them later on. Who knows? It's going to be really interesting when the Amazing Race restarts next week.
Yeah, 100%. We've got Michelle, my normal co-host. She can't be here this episode and next episode for the recaps, saying that she can't drive manual, but her race partner would be able to do it. She also says here that Cherie needs to maybe go to the gym. Obviously, working on a little bit of cardio fitness will definitely be something that will help you in the race. And I think that they've got, 19 months is a long period of time. I think if I had to go on a break from the show for 19 months, in the back of my mind, I would be doubting if this thing is ever going to happen again. And if they're big reality TV fans, they probably would have seen Big Brother Canada get completely cancelled in that year and never come back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's one of the forgotten seasons. They didn't come back. So luckily for these races, they will be able to come back. And you bring up a really valid point about three specific teams really, really dominating in these early sections of the game. It's Kim and Penn, Ryan and Dusty, and Anthony and Spencer. Throughout this whole episode, they pretty much get to all of these checkpoints without any other team being there. That just really shows you how important it is to be able to be good at driving stick shift, being able to be good at navigating as you go through these obstacles, and also obviously choosing the correct challenges at the right time. I thought that this whole specific leg was made for I think it's the Holdenesses. This whole thing was made for them because there was a lot of performance required throughout this. I mean, the first obstacle that they get to, or the first checkpoint that they get to when they do their roadblock, it is for someone to put a bagpipe together and then blow the bagpipe as part of a performance and keep your breath. You have to have good breath to get past the challenge. But this whole leg seemed to be really made for them. What did you think of this roadblock, Riley, when you saw that it was going to be putting bagpipes together? Would you be good with your hands? Would you be good at putting things like this together? It looked like quite a few people were confused at this specific point.
Yeah, and lots of people missing the bag, the actual cover, to cover the bagpipes that they're addressing there. I think Akbar was one of those that missed it. Taylor as well, I think, missed that as well. It hurt my ears a little bit hearing all those notes they were hitting. I think the judges were a little bit too lenient with that. I would have preferred to see them hit the right note as opposed to a really dull one that's going to damage my hearing. But potentially after the first one, hearing Kim and Penn, that their hearing was so damaged that they kind of had to let everything go at that point. But no, a really interesting challenge. Obviously, really speaking to the Scottish culture. The bagpipes, obviously, really iconic with Scotland, the bagpipes and the kilt, and whiskey, really, the three things we explored here. Yes, lots of great music in this episode. I really enjoyed the challenge. I thought it was great.
The really controversial and big thing that happened here at the roadblock was Arun and Natalia. I think it's Natalia, the daughter, the father and daughter team getting there together. She completes the challenge. She figures out how to do it, but then stays back to help two of the other
Yeah.
teams. Then ultimately goes and passes them in the race. Now I know you're a newbie to the amazing race, but surely Riley, you were looking at that and thinking to yourself, absolute rookie move. I know she's in a bad place because if she doesn't stop to help them at all, there's a chance she's going to get something in the future that she might struggle with, and she might not get that help from other races. But ultimately, this does cost them at the end of this leg because both those teams gets past them, and they are shown to be struggling throughout this whole leg to find the different checkpoints as they are going through the race as well. So to me, looking at this as someone as an experienced person, I thought it was a really bad move.
Yeah, and we talked about weaknesses for the races earlier in the podcast, and I don't want to foreshadow too much of what we'll discuss later with Arun and Natalia and Michael and May potentially returning in the future as one of the 7 teams coming back to the race in Switzerland. But for Arun and Natalia, they've made a couple of mistakes in the first leg. We saw them with the dart challenge really think about changing it up. Which proved to be a crucial mistake. It set them behind a little bit. Again, as you said there, Natalia communicating with the other teams, while not necessarily a bad thing, taking 5 minutes out of your time to help them, it's really going to set you behind, and it really did. And again, we'll discuss this later as well. Obviously, with the detour, Natalia again wanting to change up the detour they're doing, it really set them back again. That was probably the reason why they lost this leg of the race, unfortunately.
Yeah, so throughout this roadblock, like we said, Kim and Penn and the two guy teams, they get through it very quickly without any of the other teams get there. They get to the detour first and then realize that there's two different options for them here that they can take. They can do the kilt and sing performance, or they can do the rebuilt one here. And obviously, like we said, with the Holdernesses being this family that does YouTube videos, and you can see that they're putting an act on for the cameras, even when they're not doing these challenges at all times. They're over the top all the time. How do you feel about them as a team at this point? Like, I know that online there's a lot of dislike to them, and a lot of people think that they're well off because they've got a YouTube channel and all that kind of thing. Like, I don't think that they're probably earning millions and millions all the time, but it does seem like it's very 50-50 out there in the fan reception at the moment for the Holdernesses when they do these challenges. I don't know why that is, but maybe it is the fact that they do come across as overacting to the cameras at times.
Yeah, I mean, they are performers at the end of the day. I mean, so too are Taylor and Isaiah, and we saw that as well. Arun and Natalia, obviously not really performers. Arun especially did a dreadful job there. I thought Penn, though, for all his experience, he was a little bit too goofy. He did miss a couple of cues there with the notes. But you're right. It really was built for them, this challenge. Singing this song and having this song and dance. They seem to be in the element. Again, though, Penn was a little bit of a diva up on that stage when he missed that cue. And didn't seem too happy about it. But I suppose that's the way it goes. I did watch some of their parody videos on their channel, and yeah, I mean, as you said, it's built directly for the Holdernesses. It seemed, this challenge, and they were in the element. And kudos to them for picking the challenge, because they knew that was playing to their strengths, and they got out of it in first place, which was great.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear the different strategies here. And, for you to be a racer that goes onto this show and do well, you do need to understand your own weaknesses and strengths really well. And not just your own weakness and strengths, but also those of your partner when you're doing it. And this is a great example here of both the top two teams in the race at this stage, Kim and Penn and Ryan and Dusty, both knowing where they're going to be doing good in the specific detour, because Ryan and Dusty says that they had this agreement even before coming onto the race that if there was anything to do with singing or dancing and there's a physical challenge, or if there was any physical challenge, they would always gravitate to the physical challenge, and they then end up going to that side of it, which proves to be a good move because both these two teams move through this detour very seamlessly at this point.
Yeah, and I do want to mention as well, Ryan and Dusty and Anthony and Spencer, they've really built up a pretty decent alliance, it seems, a pretty decent relationship. They were working closely together throughout this leg of the race that we saw. So, but yeah, I feel as though there was a massive gap, though, between the rest of the teams. Obviously, we had Kim and Penn, Ryan and Dusty, and Anthony and Spencer right at the front of it. But then others like Arun and Natalia were set back by missing the M8 turnoff, miscommunicating there. Kara and Ray had a massive miscommunication. Akbar and Cherie stalled. We didn't really see too much of Connie and Sam, Lulu and Lala, and Raquel and Kayla and the like. But it seemed like it was almost in groups, because we saw with Connie and Sam, Raquel and Kayla, and Kara and Ray and Lulu and Layla, they all came in at the same time. So obviously, somewhere along the lines, it seemed like everyone was in blocks. But you're right, though. Playing to your strengths in the Amazing Race, that's what you want to do. You want to pick the right challenges for yourself. If you're Kim and Penn, you pick the Kilt challenge. If you're, Ryan and Dusty, Anthony and Spencer, 4 very strong dudes, you're going to pick the Rebuild and the Whiskey Barrel.
You say that, but one of the teams that really surprised me on that challenge was the flight attendants. The flight attendants obviously had that little moment where they said, we can do anything that guys can do just as well. They went to go do the physical thing. You would maybe think that they would gravitate towards doing some singing, doing some dancing, but they went for the physical challenge and absolutely knocked it out of the park. While Arun and Natalia, on the other hand, made the one big mistake that Michelle, sort of said last week. She said there's one thing on the Amazing Race that you never ever do, and that is switch detours. They tried to do it, didn't give it much of a go. It didn't look like they gave it much of a go. We don't actually know how long they were there. It would have been great if we had some time indication, which the Amazing Race has done for past checkpoints in previous seasons, but for some other reason we didn't see it in this specific episode, and they ended up sort of changing direction from this challenge to the other one, which ended up putting them even further behind because, talking about strengths and weaknesses, at this point, Arun and Natalia really should have known that they've been struggling the whole day to find their checkpoints, and they should have put 2 and 2 together to say, if we've been sort of struggling just to get to this checkpoint or this detour, how long is it going to take us to switch it up and go somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and I think they almost would. They obviously would have benefited from staying at the Foundry and completing that rebuild challenge. But yeah, to change it up, mid detour, really not a smart decision for them at all. And it really did set them back. They still got there ahead of teams like Akbar and Cherie, and Taylor and Isaiah, who are really dragging the tail there. But Arun obviously really struggled in that Kilt challenge. But it seemed as though, from what we saw at least, it seemed as though Natalia rocked up, saw what was happening. And they gave it maybe 5 minutes try, and she said, "Look, not for us. Let's go." I think if you're ever going to switch detours in the race, which again, as Michelle said last week, and as you just said there, not the best idea, but either do it straight away or don't do it at all. Just stick with it, because I'm not sure what the distances were between where the Kilt challenge was and the rebuild challenge was. But obviously they lost a lot of time there. Not a great idea.
Yeah, such a big risk. And I think you kind of mentioned that they were ahead of so many teams who then caught up to them. I think they were 4th place when they got past the bagpipe challenge. They were in 4th place and fell all the way from 4th to 10th, which is a massive drop. Oh, 5th place. Okay. And then fell all the way back to 10th, which was a massive drop. And so many teams just went past them. Kelly here in the live stream says that Arun and Natalia were trying to hit the metal rings in the wrong way. And there was this very specific way, because obviously the barrel gets thicker as you get to the center of it. So you've got to hit it outwards instead of inwards. So if they were doing it that way, it just shows that they weren't using common sense, or they weren't taking the time needed to actually look at the person doing the demonstration. For these types of challenges, the demonstration is so important for you to get a hold of what it is that someone's doing. And I think that if you take a little bit more time to get it, it definitely will help you. But ultimately here, making a very big mistake in switching it up and then going in the other direction, and then with especially Arun not feeling very comfortable in doing the dancing and the singing part of the challenge, it was always going to be a bit of an uphill struggle for them. Another team here that started off very low, and Michelle gave me a lot of grief, or she gave me the side eye when I said I would team up with the angrier one of the 2 twins. That would be my ideal partner in the race, because she would kick my ass all the way to the finish line. But the twins really did well this episode, because they had to come from 10th place and catch up on everyone to finish pretty strongly here in this episode. I believe they got 7th place in the end. And, I think it comes down to we didn't see them struggling too much for direction most of this episode. So clearly they must have had some time to make up from the back to get past, but they chose the right challenges from the start. And they were one of those teams that went for the singing and dancing challenge and went through that pretty quickly here in this episode. So well done to them. I think that I was proven correctly here by saying that they could still be contenders here for this specific season. And moving on to one of the pairs here, Riley, that for me was quite an interesting dynamic, and I think we touched on it earlier, was Ray and Caro, who personally I'm a little bit gutted. It doesn't look like they're going to come back when we look at the end of the episode when everybody starts running up. They were going to be the hot mess team this season that we would enjoy seeing them fight and get through the challenge somehow and having to work together. I always like to see the hot mess team, the ones that don't get along. But ultimately, here, this episode, we could just really see that, like I said, they're like all in water. She was getting really nervous about him driving. It didn't look like they were supporting each other that much in the race itself. Was it a big shock to you when you didn't see them coming back for after 19 months?
Not really, and I don't think that was a shock to anyone at all. I mean, really, from the start, they weren't going to work out on the race, were they? And we saw they were miscommunicating. When Ray was struggling with the stick shift there, and they stalled. We saw, they had a lot of miscommunication and dating for. I'm not sure how many months they were dating for before the show. In
6 or
between
7,
Love
I
Island
think.
and the Amazing Race 33. Yeah, 6 7 months on opposite sides of the country. I don't think it was ever going to work out for them at all. So yeah, certainly doesn't surprise me at all not to see them coming back.
Now, Michelle here in the live stream is asking, or she's stating that she would have done the singing and dancing. What would you have done, Riley? And let me take a guess here. I feel like you're a bit of a performer, Riley. I feel like you would have done the singing and dancing.
Look, it would all depend on who my partner was. If my partner was, not to be rude to Arun, but as musically challenged as Arun was,
Yeah.
I might not pick him. And to be honest, Arun did look spuddy delicious in that skirt. But honestly, I'm not sure I go for the singing and dancing challenge. I might go for the rebuilding challenge. Actually, I do like my whiskey as well. So that might be the one I pick.
Yeah, well, you weren't there to drink whiskey. I don't think anybody got whiskey when they were there. But for me, it'd be very
Unfortunately,
similar.
not. No.
For me, it'd be very similar. I think I would look at who I'm with and what their strengths are. But, one of those things that many people may not know about me is that I did do a lot of acting and plays when I was in school. I sang. So I
Yeah.
don't think I would have been intimidated by singing or dancing. So I could have gone either or. It wouldn't have bothered me on
Yeah,
this
I'm the
one. It would
same.
just depend
I
on who
could
I'm
have done
doing it with.
either. Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
great song by the way. It's stuck in my head. Stuck in my head now. That song. Donald, where's your trousers? Who knows where Donald's trousers are at this point?
Yeah, so and you see, this is one of the things I love about the Amazing Races. When they go to these different countries, getting to see a little bit of the culture, getting to see a little bit of what the folklore is for that specific country. That's something that I really enjoy. And seeing this from Scotland, the kilts, it's classic. It's a
Mm.
it's a folklore song. It's a classic song that you're seeing. I love seeing this, and even for the pit stop here, that is in the University of Glasgow, learning that it's the fourth oldest university in the English speaking countries in the world was something new to me as well. I wasn't aware of that at all. And I do see that you've got the University of, I think, Glasgow in the background there for today as well. You're sitting right over there in Scotland.
Yep, I'm right by the cloisters, right where Phil was only 25 months ago. So yeah, no, I'm right here in Scotland. But no, yeah, obviously Glasgow is a city steeped in history. And I suppose that's the great thing is, seeing all these locations. Some we've been to, some we haven't. But yeah, a beautiful location. I mean, the cloisters, beautiful architecture there. But yeah, amazed to hear it's such an old institution in Glasgow. A lot of people seem to get lost there. We saw Arun and Natalia. No, it was Akbar and Cherie, wasn't it? They were on the complete other side of town at that point. Arun and Natalia were right around the corner. Lots of people getting lost on their way to the university, it seemed.
Yeah. I was going to say Akbar and Sharif throughout this whole episode were struggling quite a lot. They were one of those teams that it just seemed like they chose the right things from the start. They didn't have to change detours. And they said that, Akbar said it was probably one of the worst days of his life doing the specific leg in the Amazing Race. And there was a few times that him and Sharif thought about quitting. It took them so long to get there. But the one thing that has kept Akbar going throughout this is the kids that he teach back home. And he knows that if they're not complaining and they're showing up, that he wants to set an example for them, because how could he be their teacher if he's someone that's going to quit? There's a lot of great stories and a lot of great teams here this specific season. Who's the team at this point? We're 2 episodes in now, or 3 legs into this. Who are the teams that really sort of is the teams that you're shouting for at the moment, the ones that you'd love to see go all the way and win here?
Who am I shouting for, or who do I think will win?
Well, those are 2 different questions. Let's answer both of them. What does your head say and what does your heart say?
I'd actually say the same for both. I'd say Ryan and Dusty, cheering for them. Obviously, Ryan has a great story, a very unfortunate story, but he's fought back from adversity, and getting this opportunity, this second life, really to explore the race. He's going to give it his all, and Ryan and Dusty, they stuck through all this hardship over plenty of years. So I think they're the team that are probably the strongest at the moment. And we saw them again in the rebuild challenge. They were really strong. They haven't really made a wrong step at this stage. Anthony and Spencer were another one that were very close, that I think would do well. But yeah, for me, Ryan and Dusty are the leaders at the moment. They're the ones I'm cheering for. I think Kim and Penn as well are a strong contender as well. But I think they're going to fall at some stage. Maybe a U-turn coming up.
I think Penn has already fallen down in the first leg. I think that's out of the way
He
now.
really
The
did. He
stumble has
really did.
happened,
Yeah.
and he's going to
Yeah.
continue to do well from here onwards. I don't know why. I can't fault you on your choices for both head and heart. Going for Ryan and Dusty as the team that you want to shout for here. I see the arguments there. For some other reason, Kim and Penn, they're getting a really big edit. It does look like the camera's kind of loving them. We had Phil in that first episode say, do it for the older teams. We can't have the young teams winning all the time. I don't know why they chose to show that to us in the specific edit. I, for some other reason, think that they've got a chance. I don't want to sort of count them out. I think Kim and Penn's going to be a real strong team moving forward. And then also, the really big concern that I have is that Ryan and Dusty, it does not look like they're going to have their other team, their other big alliance team coming back with them, and Anthony and Spencer. So they may have had somewhat of a shield, somewhat of an agreement there. But like you said, if a lot of the other teams know where the strong teams are at the moment, and they try and get them out of the game at key strategic points within the game, and they gang up against them, it could spell bad news for Ryan and Dusty, who by far were one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent team in the first 3 legs of this race before they went on a break and came back to it. So I'm a little bit worried for them at this stage. If I had to choose my team, I guess my head is telling me that I'm going to go with Ryan and Dusty still. You can't go against what they've proven here. I do think Kim and Penn has got a good chance. So they probably just pipped them for me at this point, just based on what we've seen in these first 3 legs. But then my heart goes out to Akbar and Cherie. It's a team that I would love to see win. And obviously not taking anything away from Ryan's story. What a crazy background he has, going to jail for something that he didn't do and being there for 10 years. And for those that are listening to this podcast, he's got his own podcast. If you go onto Instagram, talking to other inmates and people that he's met in jail, talking about the experiences they had there, which I found to be a very interesting podcast. I've listened to about 2 or 3 out of the 5 episodes that he's already published. Definitely worth a listen if you guys are listening to this. Can't recommend it highly enough. But Akbar and Cherie, great story about trying to get kids off the streets, getting them in a place where they can get education and giving them opportunity, which we spoke about in the first episode, myself and Michelle. Just a great backstory. So I'm worried for them and if they can do it. But they're getting an opportunity, like Phil said here, that no one else has had before, to go away from the race for 19 months. You've got no excuses after 19 months if you're coming back and you haven't worked on your cardio, you haven't worked on reading a map, driving a stick shift, like some of the basic things that you clearly struggled with. You've only got yourself to blame if you come back and you can't perform.
Yeah, and I think when I'm looking at the teams that are returning, the 5 teams returning plus the 2 extras, Akbar and Cherie are the 2 that I want to do a lot better, and I think they really can improve a lot. It's going to be hard to see where they fall there, because obviously everyone's had that time to really strengthen their weaknesses. So while Akbar and Cherie, they obviously have a lot of weaknesses, and I think they can strengthen their game a lot. I'm not sure whether they'll still be a little bit further behind the others. And as you alluded to there with Kim and Penn in the first episode, feel egging them on for being the older team in the race. I think Akbar and Sheree might fall a little bit further behind, simply because of that fact they are older people. They are, trying to keep up with all these youngins who are running circles around them. I think that's going to be something that, while they can improve, Sheree can obviously hit the gym, as Michelle said there. I think it's still going to be hard for them to come back, but certainly a great opportunity that no one else gets. In the middle of the game, everything stopped and put on hold, and you get that chance, almost like a second chance redemption island sort of thing, with what we've seen in a show like Survivor. It's giving these teams a chance they've never had before in the race, this chance to come back mid-race, improve on your weaknesses, and kick ass at the back end of the race. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Akbar and Sheree especially are going to improve here.
Yeah, 100%. Now, looking at the teams that we haven't spoken too much about here in this specific recap, Taylor and Isaiah didn't have a big edit, I felt like, in this specific episode. Like, they kind of went missing for large parts of this episode. But, whenever we caught up with them, it was, again, talking back about the fact that they had this viral YouTube video of them singing and dancing, or dancing, I should say, at their wedding. And they went for that specific challenge. They end up doing reasonably okay here, in 8th place. They get at the end, I believe. What was your thoughts of them on the race, and do you feel like we missed out the opportunity of seeing more of them, because it doesn't look like they're going to be one of these teams that's going to return? I did not see them in the promotion or on the end section when they showed the teams returning after 19 months.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, they're not returning at this point. I think Taylor's brother passed away in September just before filming resumed. So that was the reason why they're not returning on the race. But yeah, I'd say that's a lot of the reason for them not getting a big edit. And teams like Arun and Natalie, who I think are going to come back. I think Michael and Mel will probably come back as well. And we'll see these teams that were previously eliminated coming back. Yeah, Taylor and Isaiah, obviously they picked the challenge that was right for them. Finishing 8th, still towards the back end of the pack. But they did manage to eclipse Akbar and Sheree there in that bagpipe challenge. They were basically neck and neck. Got just ahead of them, I think, in the end there. But yeah, I think Taylor and Isaiah are a team that, even if they're not coming back in this season, if at some point in the future we can see Anthony and Spencer, Taylor and Isaiah, probably not Cara and Ray, but these teams that aren't returning, see them come back in the future would be great. And I think Taylor and Isaiah are a team that would have great potential in the future. Again, they were a team that struggled with the stick shift, and they really struggled to get to the bagpipe challenge at Moore. They struggle with directions. So I think, again, that was something that we didn't see too much of them. But if they were to return in the future, whether it's 34 or beyond, they would know what to do in the future to, get better in the race.
Yeah, and then the other two teams that we haven't spoken too much about that also won't be returning is Connie and Sam, and then obviously the big one is Anthony and Spencer. Talking about Connie and Sam first year, they had a reasonably good start to the race. They consistently placed pretty high. Like, again, they placed 4th place here. They seem to have a really good backstory with having the son that they adopted. I wanted to see them do pretty well. I believe Sam may have been pregnant at the time of the show coming back, so that's why they didn't return to the show. But again, I feel like
Connie's pregnant.
Connie is pregnant.
Sam.
But it may have been a little bit of a bummer not to see them back. I'd love to see them hopefully get another opportunity. Some of these players that it wasn't their fault, because you've got to make big commitments, and everything, the moon and the stars, everything has to align for you to go out there and play this game. And sadly, it didn't work out that way for a few people. Maybe they didn't know when the show was going to come back, which is understandable because of the climate that we're living in right now. Nobody knows if anything's certain at this point. I'd love to see Connie and Sam come back and play the game again as well. But the big one was Anthony and Spencer, right? Because they played really well. Again, great story about stopping a terrorist attack in France. I immediately just like to see the dynamic between these two. They look like a really good team that I would want to shout for throughout the race. They're not going to come back here either. I don't know why. I don't know if you've got any insights in regards to why they didn't return to play the game again, but it's a shame not to see them come back as well.
Yeah, it is a shame, and they were one of the more dominant teams of the race. And I think from listening to some of the other podcasts that have been recapping this last episode, it seems like they haven't put anything out at this stage. So hopefully they make a statement as to why they didn't return, for this season of the race. And as we said, I really do hope that we see Anthony and Spencer, Taylor and Isaiah, Connie and Sam, Cara and Ray, if they're together in the end and they want to come back, it'd be great to see them return as well. Because yeah, I mean, you talked about Big Brother Canada 8 before, and how that was stopped because of COVID. We missed out on seeing so many fun so many fun housemates returning from that season. And I'd hate, just because Anthony and Spencer or Connie and Sam missed out on the race because they couldn't, for whatever reason, return. I'd hate to see that be the end of them and their amazing race future. I really hope in the future we do see them return to the race, because Connie and Sam especially, I was really rooting for them. We didn't see too much of them in the edit as well, similar to Taylor and Isaiah. I think they were a little bit neglected because they're not returning. But I'd love to see Connie and Sam. They have a really interesting dynamic. Whether that will be possible in the short-term future with Connie having a newborn child, probably not too possible for at least another couple of years. But even then, I'd love to see some of these teams return. Anthony and Spencer and Connie and Sam, top of my wish list.
Yeah, 100%. Kelly here in the live says that rumors is that one of them was injured. I think she's referring to Anthony and Spencer. So that's a shame, obviously. Would have loved to see them come back. I do think that they're one of those teams that just have, I mean, whenever you cast for these shows, you want someone to have a great backstory. And I mean, you don't get a bigger backstory than the one that they have. So I think easily people will recognize them if they were to play in a future season, even if they come back in an all-star season as like a wild card team that didn't go very far. But let's talk about the two teams that's pretty much been confirmed. If you look on some of the screenshots that is on Reddit, who's coming back, the two teams that are the two luckiest teams probably in Amazing Race history. But then again, if you look at the non-elimination legs that you sometimes get in these shows, I mean, there's certain winners that have been lucky with non-elimination legs in the past, and I don't think it's something that's frowned upon as badly in the Amazing Race as it is on Survivor when you go to like the edge of extinction and you come back and play the game again. We've got two teams that's going to return, and the two teams are Arun and Natalia and Michael and Mo. I was a big fan of Michael and Mo. I thought that they seemed like great guys. I love the fact that they were going out there for their community, especially at a time when police officers, I think in America, is under scrutiny all the time. I think it is a great opportunity for them to be role models and show that they're also human beings at the same time. And just get a positive message out there, hopefully, on the race. I'm so happy to see them both come back and perform. I do think that they got one thing wrong in the first leg, which was putting the paintings up and doing the puzzle painting and putting it up before they sorted it out and then ripping it apart. Exactly. Yeah. But they could be a very undercover, dangerous team because we don't know what they're good at and what they're bad at this point. And I mean, they're police officers, so you would think that they have a lot of common sense, even though in that first episode they didn't display it.
Yeah, well, you're right, but I think artistic common sense and street smarts are two completely different things. But yeah, hopefully they don't do something as stupid as they did last time. They can actually learn. All right, let's look at what needs to be done. Let's actually read the instructions. And before we start tacking on these things with glue on the wall, let's just take a second to look at what's got to be done here. That was a terrible job. Arun and Natalia, though, them returning as well. I think Arun and Natalia especially have a lot to learn. Natalia especially, wanting to do the detour on, wanting to change detours on that darts challenge on the second leg, I think it was. And again, actually changing detours on this episode as well, which ultimately saw them eliminated. I think it's going to be a big opportunity for them to come back. I think they can actually do really well, especially if they develop a lot more of that communication there. I think Arun especially was a little bit emotional at times. Natalia was always playing a little bit worried, which I think set them back a little bit. But if they can recognize where they went wrong and, air out those things and figure out, okay, well, if we're wanting to do a detour, what's going to be the best of us, the physical challenge or the, dancing challenge? They need to figure out what's right for them and pick the right challenges, because that's ultimately what has set them back so far is they're second guessing themselves, wanting to change halfway through the detour. It's not going to work out for them. And I think I hope they've learned from their mistakes.
Well, they've had 19 months to think about this, and that would have been, well, I guess you could defend and say that both Arun and Natalia and Michael and Mo, even though they've had 19 months, they may not have known that they would actually get the opportunity to come back, because I'm sure
Yeah,
that the show
yeah,
tried everything in their power to get the original cast that was still in the game back, and then they would have been alternates. Maybe they would have gotten a phone call later than some of the teams that were guaranteed to definitely come back. So there is a chance they may not have learned from it, but you'd hope that they have learned something from doing the race this way and then coming back. It is a unique opportunity that they're going to get. Now, one of the things for me, Riley, that I'm quite interested in is that, we've seen here 3 legs now on the show that were done prior to the pandemic, prior to everything shutting down. How do you think the race is going to look different when they go back to Switzerland now? We had that little bit of an opening segment with Phil standing on the beach somewhere. I believe it may have been in California. It kind of looked like that for me. I'm not from America, so don't come at me if I'm wrong about what beach he was on, but it was completely eerie. There was no one on the beach. Do you expect to see a lot of secluded areas that they're going to move into and running around? We probably won't see as much of a backdrop, because when they did this, I believe it was between us starting to get control of Delta and Omicron getting out. I believe. I could be wrong about my timing on that. How much do you think the race will be different now moving forward?
yeah. I think it was a little bit earlier than that.
Okay.
That the race restarted, probably just after Delta really started to transmit. But looking at the future legs, a lot of them seem to be not so much desolate, remote locations. But looking at Corsica in France, obviously, that's not a major city like a Paris or a London or a Glasgow. Thessaloniki as well in Greece is going to be one that's not as densely populated. I'm really glad that Bertrand Van Munster actually took his time to think about where they're going to go, what alternate plans they have for the race, because the last thing I would have wanted to see, and while I don't mind seeing your own backyard going through the US, I think it's certainly a lot. I'd prefer to see them overseas in an environment that they're not used to. Obviously, a run not being able to drive on the left hand side of the road, it's culture shock for them. So seeing them go through Europe as opposed to just sticking safe in the US, it's really great to see them try that out. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing how they go. And props to the crew for actually filming overseas during a global pandemic, especially in Europe, where there have been so many cases. But as Marcus says there, a lot of the cities they're in are ones that don't have as much transmissibility. They're not as densely populated as a London or Manchester or Glasgow or Paris would be.
Yeah, and Kelly says here that it basically resumed between September 17 to October the 6th, when they were doing this. So I'm really, really bad with which variant was the most dominant at that time. Pretty sure it was Delta that was sort of
Yeah,
the biggest one. But like Marcus said, that there were certain places that they were going to go. Which is a shame, because it does, like, one of the things that I personally really enjoy seeing when I watch The Amazing Race is seeing the teams go to countries like Africa, going somewhere in the Middle East,
yeah.
going somewhere in Asia, and the culture shock, like you mentioned, of going to those places is something that can be interesting to see people navigate through that. And we're probably going to be robbed of that. But if you had to choose between, like you said, getting a season and not getting a season, then we'd much rather see a season than not see one at all. And hopefully, I think the future of the show at this stage, it's still 50-50 on when they can do a proper season again in the future. But I mean, in Australia, they've had a whole season locally instead of going abroad and doing it. I know that with the US, with their big shows, they don't normally want to shoot them locally. They do want to do the shows justice and stick as
Mm.
closely as possible to the theme as it should be. I mean, look at Survivor. They didn't do anything locally, where Australia did a local season, South Africa did a local season. They chose to wait until they could go to Fiji. So I feel like they really want to try and stay as authentic as they possibly can. But it's going to be interesting. And both me and you, Riley, will get a little bit of a feel for what the race is going to look like going into the next one. I hope that, they've had a lot of time to plan for the next 19 months, that they come back with more difficult challenges and obstacles. Let the challenges and the obstacles become the main attraction. If the locations can't be the main attraction, you're going to have to try and sort of divert our attention somewhere else, because of the fact that the show is going to be a bit different here.
Yeah, and I don't think the locations are going to be poor at all. And just looking ahead at some of the locations, they're going to be great. Of course, Corsica is one of the locations that's slated. A beautiful island, obviously known as the ancestral home of one Napoleon Bonaparte. So I think we'll actually see a lot of French history there, which will be really fascinating. I'm looking forward to that leg. And again, a lot of these Greek cities, these Swiss cities as well, are going to be really exciting to see. But yeah, no, I think a lot of it must be contractual with the Amazing Race, because I know for Survivor as well, Survivor US especially has to film overseas. Survivor South Africa faced a lot of struggles in terms of them filming domestically. I do wonder whether a lot of that is built in the contract they have to film overseas. But then again, I think for the viewership, they'd much rather watch people run around France and Italy as opposed to Denver and Salt Lake City. I think it's a lot more entertaining seeing those different environments, and as you say, these culture shocks. And while Europe is a bit of a safe environment and it doesn't expose you to Africa and Asia and all these different cities with language barriers, I think it's still going to be fun nonetheless.
No, 100%. Now, looking ahead at next episode as we get to the close of this podcast recap here, we've got Kim and Penn, Ryan and Dusty, Raquel and Kayla, Lulu and Lala, Akbar and Cherie, Arun and Natalia, and Michael and Mo, who would have believed they're back in the race. They could potentially still win this thing. They're going to be competing in this next episode. If you were a betting man, Riley, who do you think is the team that is in the most danger here? Do you think it is going to be a pretty straightforward? We're just going to see Arun and Natalia and Michael and Mo be the next two teams to again get eliminated here? Or do you truly think that, the whole momentum and how things have played out until this point, anything that happened prior to leg 4 may not really matter at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think it is going to be. I hate to say it, but I think it's going to be pretty cut and dry. Michael and Mo are going to be who I'm predicting to go home in this next episode. The question becomes: do we get U-turns thrown in? Do we get things shaken up this early on? Who knows? But yeah, I'd be looking at Arun and Natalia, Michael and Mo being two teams that are vulnerable. And yeah, we're not sure how soon between filming resuming and them getting the call they had to fly out. So the question is, how much have they actually brushed up on their dart throwing skills or on their whiskey barrel building skills? Who really knows? But as Michelle there says in the chat, it's going to be great to see them come back and have this second chance. It's something that's never happened before. People returning on the same season that they were eliminated from the race. So I'm really excited to see it happen. And Arun and Natalia, especially, are a team I'm really looking forward to seeing how they come back. Natalia has just gotten married as well, so see how that changes her perspective as well, and their dynamic as a father and daughter combination.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that, 100% Arun and Natalia, Michael and Mo, they're going to have to prove themselves. I feel like Michael and Mo could be the surprise of the season. They could come back, have hidden skills that we weren't aware of because they just flunked out, kind of choked in that first leg, but they could come back and do a lot better here, potentially, if they don't have any artistic piece of puzzle that they have to put on a wall somewhere. Maybe they're okay, and the bad leg is out of the way now. So I don't know if they'll go first, but like you said, limited time to prepare. It's a high chance. Just to put a different team out there that I think is in danger, and I really don't want to put their name out there. I do think Akbar and Cherie, if they haven't gone back and learn from the mistakes that they've made at this point in regards to being able to navigate, in regards to being able to consistently keep up with the pace and running from location to location, and just their general communication styles between each other, and that it'll have to improve for them to continue to be in the game. I don't want them to go next. Like I said, I mean, my heart really wants them to go on and do well and win this, to be a great example to their community and to the kids that they teach back home, that anything is possible and that anyone can achieve anything. I think would be such a great story. But I do think that they're still in danger. And I also think that Lulu and Lala, they're a hot and cold team. I joked about them a little bit earlier about me being right and Michelle being wrong. But let's be honest, they're hot and cold. They're either going to do really well or they're going to go really bad. And will they blow up again? Will they be that hot mess team that potentially is still in the game at this stage? The early edit suggests that they may be. So I don't know how they're going to go long term in this game if they do come back. But I do think it is going to be a new race. The momentum has been stopped. Everybody's coming back. the whole way that the race is going to be, with there being no airports and flying and commercial planes. I believe it's all private going for the rest of the game as well. I think that does take away some of the strengths that the flight attendants potentially may have had navigating in airports and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this changes things up, and even more so interesting to see who's going to team up and who had those, because even in all-star seasons, there's people who talk, they would have had agreements in place to say they're not allowed to do it, but I'm sure there would have been teams that would have talked prior to coming back that is going to team up and that are going to do things. I mean, how can you not talk to them for 19 months if you've just done these first 3 legs together? That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, I mean, they're really lucky to actually get a second chance. I did say it before, with Big Brother Canada, they never got a second chance. For the Amazing Race 33, it's such a unique situation for them to be in, but getting a second chance, they're unbelievably lucky. And Arun and Natalie and Michael and Mo, obviously, very, very lucky. But everyone, should be able to continue on the race. And yeah, while we do lose 4 teams who were really great, and a lot of them I was rooting for, it's going to be really entertaining to see, as you say, a hard reset on the race, see how teams go. Will Kim and Pen and Ryan and Dusty have a target on their back? How will Lulu and Lala fare? We saw how well Lulu and Lala improved from that second leg where they finished last, but it was non-elimination, to come up to 7th out of 10 in this race. Akbar and Cherie have, as you say, been down towards the bottom there. It's going to be really interesting to see how these teams come back and what different dynamics they have. It's going to be fascinating, and I really look forward to seeing how the rest of the season goes.
Yeah, you and me both. So, Riley, I will see you back here next week to do one more cover up or covering in for Michelle on the nullified take for the Amazing Race coverage, which I'm really thankful that we had you here for this specific episode. So I'm looking forward to see how everything is going to reset for this next episode. What do you have going on at the moment on your channel on Snuffed here on YouTube? And give the viewers, anybody that's listening to this, I do see a lot of familiar names in the live stream already, and I know that there is a lot of familiar people that will be following this channel as well. But for those who don't know who you are, give them a little bit of a brief of what you do on the Snuffed YouTube channel.
Yeah, well, I basically post videos every week about Survivor, US Survivor mainly, but also dabble on Australian Survivor and Survivor South Africa occasionally. Just recently, I posted a video on how Erica won in Survivor 41. A great video there. Other than that, I post a lot of videos, analyzing strategies, top 5 lists, all sorts of things. And with it being the Survivor off season at the moment, there'll be plenty more to come. I'll have a video on Australian Survivor in the coming weeks as well. And plenty about, I'm going to be looking really at a lot of the old school challenges on my channel in the coming weeks. And also some of the history of Survivor, some of the what if moments. Got a really exciting video coming up in the future about a particular vote in Survivor Africa that could have drastically changed the history of Survivor. So if you're wanting some US Survivor content and you're into that sort of thing, head on over to my channel right here on YouTube called Snuffed.
Yeah, guys, definitely go check that out. Riley is someone that works extremely hard at putting those videos together. And, I'd be very interesting to see the Erica video as well, because I think there's a few people still trying to figure out how she won that season. Was very well deserved, but Survivor 41 was definitely a new era of the show. So really looking forward to seeing how that plays out on your channel. So go check that out on Snuffed here on YouTube, guys. We'll be back next week here on the Nullified Take to talk about the next Amazing Race episode as well. And for those that are also really big fans of the challenge, we've got the Challenge All-Stars 2 finale recap happening tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over in the US. So check that out. I'll have Angel Cake Entertainment and Chantel Francis from Reality Realness back with me on the podcast as well. I also just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody that has subscribed to this channel in the first week. We nearly hit 100 subscribers, which is amazing. I didn't expect us to get up to 95 subscribers as quick as we have, but I really appreciate you guys supporting this new channel. And please be sure to subscribe and like this video if you want to see more of this content in the future here, and for me to bring more guests on. I think that Riley mentioned he'll work with me this first season, but I need at least 200 subscribers for him to come back next season and talk to me as well. So help me get Riley back on the show, guys. Riley, it's been great talking to you. I'll talk to you next week. And guys in the live stream, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. We look forward to chatting with you guys next week. See ya. Bye.